Hi everyone, I'm Ashlei Cooper with PHC News and the Wholesaler Magazines. I am out in Romeoville, Illinois for another episode of the McNeeley View. I'm at Chicago Tube and Iron and I'm with Dr. Donald McNeeley, who is the president and CEO of the company. He is also a professor at Northwestern University School of Engineering and one of our very own columnists. And today, Dr. McNeeley, I want to talk pretty candidly with you. In 2015, I was able to take over leadership of two of the magazines with Team B Publishing. So I want us to kind of step back to Dr. McNeeley as the budding leader of a company. Can you just give me some advice? Let's start with perhaps talking about managing people, managing a team. What should I be thinking about?
So when you say harken back, that's a long journey after 40 years in the industry, but I certainly appreciate the question. It's an interesting time in my career to reflect on life. You've heard me speak before about the different stages of your career, which really is embedded in the stages of your life. And if you look at this concept called life that starts with an L, it has really 4 stages. The first one is you learn. You go to school and you learn, so that L phase is very important. And once you're at the point where you're ready to leave the flock, you then move to leadership. So you go from learning and then you lead people with what you've learned. At some point in your career, you're going to encounter a journey or a stage, if you will, that's legacy. Okay, I'm in a pseudo glide path. What is it that I want my legacy to be, and have I solidified that? Lord knows I've had enough months, years, quarters to do that, in my case, decades. And then the last one is leave. You need to know when it's time to leave. Otherwise, you'll be clogging up the queue behind you and losing your very best people. So specific to what I wish somebody would have told me, or my advice to you, is understand there are 4 stages to that journey, number 1. Number 2, understand that you control your destiny. So you need to be consciously aware of what stage you're in at what time in your career, and premeditate how you want that career stage to look when you move to the next one. And the third advice I would give you is snap your fingers, because it absolutely goes that fast. You'll reach a point where all of a sudden that sand is moving through that hourglass faster and faster and faster. There's nothing you can do to retard that flow or even slow that flow. But as you get older, each year in your management career will ramp up in acceleration.
And we often talk about the dynamics of baby boomers and now millennials. So I'm a millennial, a younger person now in a role of leadership. Do you have any advice on managing a multi-generational workforce as a young person?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to do, but I'll tell you what's happening. There's this perception that the baby boomers don't like the millennials don't like the baby boomers, and perceptions don't fall out of the air. We've all had buddies that say, hey, that's really a stupid looking hat today, just kidding. Well, Sigmund Freud says there's no such thing as a joke. If somebody's launched a commentary, they want it to register, and the first thing they do after that commentary registers is they try to distance themselves from their very words. You can't take your own words back. So to the millennial and the baby boomers, we grew up at a time of war, and if you look at post-World War II, 1946 on, kind of the management leadership model was time and grade, which of course was an extension from the military. So Joe retires. Well, who's the most senior guy under Joe? Because he goes next. Because of course he has 25 years experience. The guy behind him in the queue has 23. But there's a couple of criticisms I have of our generation. Number 1, even though many of my generation sit in judgment and fear of the next generation, I think the millennials have a legitimate complaint with my generation in that we left you $17 trillion worth of debt. And I think that's unconscionable. I mean, that's ridiculous. From the time you guys were born, we told your generation, don't spend more than you make, don't run up your debt on your credit card, don't buy something you have no intention of paying back. Yet the generation sitting there pontificating to you is the generation that's going to hand over $17 trillion plus. To the millennials are interesting in that the millennials are smart, they're ambitious. You know, in the time and grade model we talked about, that was a function of the guy with 25 years really has more experience than the guy with 20. Does he? Because what I find is the person with 10 years experience knows twice as much as the person with 5. The person with 20 years experience doesn't know twice as much as the person with 10, they just have more contacts, more resources. So I think our generation thinks in our industry, the PB&F industry, the learning curve is so long and so protracted, and you had to be smart like us to master that. Well, truth be told, there are some guys with 25 years experience in our industry, but there's probably more guys with 1 year experience 25 times over, really reflecting no growth. So your generation is smart, it's quick, it learns fast. What our industry is finding is the smarter people we attract and hire, the shorter our learning curve is. So I think that learning curve, the perception of it being protracted, was really our badge of honor. Now, specific to your generation, I have a colleague that has offered advice to our young people, and it's remember your career is a marathon, not a sprint. There's certain things that you need to pick up along the way. You need to push the envelope. You certainly want to have your fingerprints all over what that future is going to look like, because that's the future you're going to spend your life. But be patient, be respectful of tradition. There's a lot of talk in the millennial generation that you're going to have to manage now about work-life balance. You know, money is of secondary importance to flexibility. Well, you know, there's something that's axiomatic, and that is there's a direct correlation between how hard you work and the rewards you reap. And there's no getting away from that.
And still on the subject of people and interacting with people, can you speak on customer service and catering to our audience, or for you, what would be a customer?
Yeah, if you look at the makeup of our industry, it's not very diverse, and it's not very diverse not only in race and religion, but not very diverse in age. And if you look at the macroeconomic trends in society, you know, Wayne Gretzky's theory that don't skate to where the puck is, skate to where the puck is going to be. And I think what we need to do is to find a more diverse work environment. We need to find more bilingual people, and not simply in Espanol, but we're going to need people that know Mandarin and Hindi. We need to have that diversity there, because that's the complexion of our customers going forward. And you've been out at the university with me. You walk into my classroom, it looks like a veritable League of Nations. But you know what's interesting about that? Walk in any classroom and that's how it looks. That's the complexion of the world going forward. So we really need to be reflective of not only our own industry and our competitors, but we certainly need to be reflective of our commercial customers. We started when we reached a tipping point where we can bring groups of young people in together. We can go to the college campus and recruit engineers and marketing specialists and businessmen in finance and accounting. You know, I would go to the college campus because I'm the professor. I'm going to be able to resonate with these kids. That's a mistake. You know, I'm those potential employees' father's age, maybe not that far away from their grandfather's age. So we've got to start controlling the optic more to attract the people that will be more reflective of what our customers look like, because there's nothing better than that generational connection.
And you've talked often, and you mentioned it just a few minutes ago, about planning by quarter, or then planning by 5 years, planning by 20 years. Can you give me advice when it comes to that, strategic planning?
So strategic planning is a must. It's certainly very difficult right now. You've heard me speak to these metrics. You know, our unit of measurement that's universally accepted in our industry is the CRU, and it reverts to how much steel is selling for on a universal measurement unit known as a hot band, one of those big coils. Well, in 2008, wasn't that long ago, those were for raw steel costs $1,090 a ton. And this last year, 11 months ago when we began this year, we were at $603 a ton. As I sit before you today, I'm not proud to tell you that steel has fallen all the way to $350 a ton. And that's why nobody is making money. I mean, you've had this cascading effect occur. So in that environment, where do you bring that talent in that can navigate that? Well, first of all, the attraction is you're bringing that talent in at the low of the industry. So as we eventually exit this, and as Shakespeare said, this too shall pass, we will exit this. You need to see that talent coupled with that success, giving credit for that success, because that'll really light their career on fire. The other advice I would give to new people coming in the industry, there's somehow a stigma in the millennial generation that I'm going to have 7 to 9 jobs by the time I'm 40. And even young employees that are happy seem to feel compelled to move because that's what the expectations of others will be. And even at the university, I may have shared this story with you before, but I had a young student with Motorola. He had been there 9 years. He was making 6 figures. He had worked for 3 different people, all of whom he was happy with. He had just received a very substantial bonus, and he had coffee with me after class. And he was thinking of leaving. And I said, why in the world would you leave? And he said, you know, if I'm here another 6 months, I will have been here 10 years, and I'm concerned how that's going to look on my resume. I said, you're talking to somebody that's been with our company 35 years. So it's an interesting mindset, but I think we need to continue to prepare our corporations, our organizations, to be reflective of the commercial. To do that, you need to bring people in and build them in a skill set, and then create an environment where you don't want to leave them because you have all that talent invested in them. And I remember sitting with our chairman of the board one day. He was addressing a group of young people, and he said, you know, your brand is very important. What is your brand? If we go out there and I ask 15 people, Ashlei Cooper is, and have them fill in the rest of that paragraph, and then I aggregate those paragraphs, that's your brand. Like it or not, that's your brand. If you continue to bounce around the industry to different employers, you can still maintain your brand, but when people bounce around today, the millennials are trying out all these different industries. So if you change jobs every 4 or 5 years, where do you set roots to establish your brand? Because at the end of your career, at a certain point in your career, your brand in your industry is going to be more valuable than anything in your pocket.
Can you talk about the opposite of planning? Troubleshooting. So when emergencies happen, when you're answering on the fly or you're making decisions on the fly, what is your advice for that?
You need to be flexible to go off grid when you have to. If it's to satisfy a customer need, you want to make sure you don't over-regiment your environment. If you over-regiment your environment, then you're not going to be able to respond quickly enough to customers. So it sounds like I'm telling you, on one hand, you need to have a strategic plan, you need to have a framework, you need to have a vision, and if you don't, you're going to end up an attrition statistic. But I would tell the up-and-comers, make sure you have exit doors when justified in this strategic plan. Be flexible enough to respond to the ever-changing customer needs.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to give me advice. If you would like to follow along with us more, you can visit us at phcnews.com or thewholesaler.com.